So, welcome, Ian. Welcome to Built on Stories. This is our little chat, and probably to give a little bit of context around, because I'm acutely aware, as we were just chatting before I pressed record, that the world does not need another podcast with a middle-aged man chatting to another middle-aged man on it. So, but the thinking was, look, Built on Stories is kind of like we're a business built on telling people stories and telling businesses stories in the built environment. And we were thinking the fact that we get to meet so many amazing people and so many interesting stories in the sort of real estate sector that we kind of need to, we kind of want to showcase them and have a chat around them. So that's kind of what brought us to this and to have a chat, not a podcast, and go from there. So I better introduce you. So Iain Thomson, these days managing director, founder of Bellona. We first met at Ironbridge, well, former Ironbridge Power Station. We were working for Uniper, you were working for Harworth, and you basically inherited us, for better or for worse. And I was thinking the other day, we've been obviously client, colleague, friends for a long time, but I actually never found out how you started at Harworth, how you got into it. You were very good in that sort of role, very natural with the media. So I kind of wanted to find out, your little story from there.
Well, thanks for having me on. Disastrous decision from you to have me as one of your first guests. But anyway, we'll take it from there. So, no, thanks for the introduction. Yeah, it was a long time ago now. So that was 7 years ago, 2018, when Harworth were basically in the fashion of buying big, dirty, complex sites, which was the requirement of the chief exec at the time, and that's what we told the market, being a listed entity. My role at the time was head of communications and investor relations. And in terms of the story, and you're quite right, the reason why we came into contact with each other was that we thought, bloody hell, this is an absolutely massive scheme. We need people who know the patch locally and also know a lot of the stakeholders, for better or worse, to use your nomenclature, in Shropshire, because it was the first ever development that the Harworth had done in Shropshire. And it was quite odd, Alex, because in my role as head of communications, I very rarely used an external agency to perform that function. Most of it was done in-house, simply because I think that most people are rubbish at it. And I still think that most people are rubbish at it. However, when we got chatting, there was two immediate things that struck me. One was we got on well, so therefore you listened to the brief, but also you had a fairly well-established system of doing things. So therefore it was, look, you don't have to reinvent the wheel here at Harworth. We've already done a lot of the effort required on the preparation side. We understand the people that you need to speak to based upon what you want to do with the site, and we'll make that easy. And ultimately it was successful, because Harworth eventually got a planning consent from Shropshire Council and Telford. It was a dual authority application in 2021, and the guys are going through the site. So ultimately that relationship worked really, really well, and I'd expect your clients to have exactly the same view that I've just given on this podcast. In terms of me getting into that position in the first place, I've no idea really, because my career started in the public sector. So following graduating from Sheffield Uni, I ended up getting onto the National Graduate Development Programme for local government. And it's where I had lots of hair. It was 2004. It was a great time. It was before all the money went into Manchester City Football Club. I stuck about with that for about 8 or 9 years. But in all honesty, my face didn't fit in the public sector, despite what I tried working on. I think that was a little bit too rough and ready, a little bit too annoyed at lack of progress on various things. I just wasn't a public sector individual. But then from obscurity, an opportunity came up at Harworth, and it turns out that myself and the chief exec got on extremely well. And initially, that opportunity was for something called an MBA, almost like an MBA secondment, which is someone going in and writing up business cases for various bits of the business. However, 4 days before I started, in September 2013, I went in to see the chief exec. He goes, you all right taking communications on? I said to him, well, what are you talking about? I've never done communications before. I've never even thought about communications. Why are you giving me this job? And he goes, well, I'm giving it you, and here are your 10 responsibilities, obviously on Monday. So entirely by accident, I fell into communications. And that was an interesting period because suddenly I'm going, well, I've got to work with the media. I've got to obviously create a communication strategy. Then obviously from the early part of 2015, Harworth became a listed vehicle. And then that
Yeah.
morphed into me taking on the investor relations role. So in reality, a lot of people, you ask people, well, how have you ended up in this situation? It was a number of accidents and things coming together and things outside my control. I ended up having to adapt to that. And, ultimately that led to, I loved my time at Harworth. But, I left that business at the start of 21 because I was then living in the south of England. And I was really struggling with balance, in all honesty. Obviously, having all my work up north and in the Midlands, so it was really it was a massive wrench to leave that business. Because I still love that business today. I
There
made
were
a
some
chunk.
amazing projects, weren't there?
Yeah, massive. I mean, look, apart from Ironbridge Power Station, you've got sites like Advanced Manufacturing Park in Rotherham, where you've got McLaren, Boeing, Rolls-Royce. So that is in effect the what people used to laughably call the Mayfair address for advanced manufacturing in the UK. But that's Harworth development alongside the development of about 3,000 plus houses next door. You had major industrial sites. You had rail connected sites within it. So you had a mixture of the redevelopment of former collieries, power stations, aluminium smelters. You've got the odd greenbelt extension, so sustainable urban edge extension in there as well. It wasn't just brownfield development. But yeah, absolutely fantastic business. But following on from that, I joined a hydrogen business for a number of months. That didn't go particularly well. That's something I don't tend to talk about on my CV.
Oh,
But glad I took it on. It was worth a punt, but it was
yeah.
a definite punt. And when I eventually released my memoir, Subject to Demand, which there won't be any, I could probably talk about it a little bit further.
I forgot about the actually.
Yeah, I mean, it was So with AFC Energy, they supplied the hydrogen fuel cell power system for Extreme E. So for the first and second seasons, but I was just there for the first season in 2021, amongst others. But no, it was worth it. No, it was worth seeing what I could do at a different listed company, and we achieved some good things while I was there. But it meant that by the end of 21, I wanted to do something new, and that's why I set up Bellona Advisors. So Bellona Advisors has been going now for 3.5 years. People can read more about it on the website. I'm not going to bore them on this call. And then I've got another business as well, Bridgeway Global and Advanced Manufacturing, with Keith Ridgway. And we've just won our first foreign piece of work this week in South Korea on that business. So things have worked out pretty well. All from happy accidents.
Yeah. I mean, the Harworth stuff what would you reckon is your favourite project on that? I mean, there was just massive regen. I mean, I love Ironbridge because it was obviously involved in it. You and I were sat there when the cooling towers came down. It was quite an event. But what would your favourite regen be?
Ironbridge was up there.
Was
So
it?
Ironbridge, Ironbridge, because of the location of the site, the amount you could do with it. Because I mean, it was 300 plus acres. Apart from the cooling towers, you had all the old offices. You had a golf course in there, an old workshop. But then you had to obviously design things around a massive substation outside of the ownership in the centre of the site. And I found the stakeholders around there, the councils and various other people, fairly easy to work with. Actually, you're not supposed to have your favourites in Regeneration, but a couple I really enjoyed working on. One was Thorsby Colliery, which was the last ever deep mine to close in the Midlands. So that was 90 years of coal before it shut in 2015. The redevelopment of that and the approach to it was very, very intense, but I loved it. It's a great site, absolutely perfect for Regeneration. And Harworth have brought forward, they're about to bring forward, I should say, eventually have about 1,000 homes on there, along with a 300-acre country park next door. So it ties in
Yeah.
with the local forestry around there. Fantastic views if you get up to that bit of Nottinghamshire. I also loved working on Logistics North. That was a big old former surface mine site in Bolton, 800 acres. That was Greenbelt when Harworth got a planning consent in 2013. But then, got 7,500 people working on there now. And you've got
Yeah.
companies like Aldi, Lidl, MBDA, Komatsu. So a mixture of logistics and manufacturing on there.
Yeah.
And because I'm from the northwest, and it was Bolton. People from Bolton are hilarious, absolutely hilarious, lovely people, and it just meant that it just as well that period, like 2014 to 2019, the industrial market was really, really hot, and therefore suddenly people going, right, well, that move from in-person to online retail was really hitting its stride, which meant that suddenly I had a series of property requirements to try and fulfill, and not that many big logistics developments in the northwest at the time to accommodate it. So there were only 2 or 3 big competitor sites to Logistics North at the time, which meant that we were able to develop things well and develop things quickly. So no, I thoroughly enjoyed working on it. But no, just the entire regeneration game, if you wanted to call it that, to borrow a Brucey expression, it's fantastic. It's great to work on. Yeah.
With your you mentioned being from Bolton and around there. Now, the one thing you are very good at, which you have no problem with, is straight into the media. So I've seen you on radio, I've seen you with the BBC, I've seen you in camera multiple times. You're very natural. You're very good. So did that if you didn't have a background in sort of media beforehand, is that just natural to you, or like did you work on it like because a lot of work we do obviously we're getting people prepared for it, and for you you've never had an issue with it at all.
I'd love to say it was natural, but it's not. I was well taught. So when I went to Harworth, Owen Michelson, who's the chief executive, we appointed a communications firm to handle the corporate side of the business called Tavistock, based in London.
Yeah.
And one of the things that Tavistock did within the first month was get me in for a fairly hardcore media training session. And so, right, Ian, if you're going to remember anything to do with media, it was James Whitmore. It was a really, really top guy. I remember him pulling me aside. He goes, if you're going to remember anything about working with us, remember these rules about chatting to the media. Bang. And they were fairly straightforward things, but I'd never, again, properly thought about it before. But that was mixed with just being thrown in at the deep end. And so, therefore, by the end of December 2013, I'd already handled live interviews, radio and in person with the Beeb on a development that was quite contentious, which was Door Mill in Warwickshire, which has never been developed actually. So it was a mixture of being well trained by the people who were advising me, but then just going at it on a regular basis. One thing I was always good at was public speaking. So public speaking's never had a problem with that. Loved presenting, loved being part of plays as a kid, loved pretending to commentate as a kid. So therefore the speaking side was very, very easy. But even people who are naturally gifted at a particular subject, no, there needs to be an element of teaching in there and learning from people who've been doing it for years and years. And that was the case. But no, I'm thanks for the compliment anyway. We'll see if
you are good, but
we'll see if people agree with that when they're listening, or watching it back, because they might just say, "God, it's a complete waste of 15 minutes of my life." But we'll see.
If they get this far in, we'll be in a good place. So,
they're eligible to 10% off Bellona Advisors services if they get this far in.
Now, you skimmed over Bellona, but I think you should. It's an interesting thing because we're both in comms, both got agencies, but you're at, how would you describe it, a different part of it. So I think it's worth chatting about that because what you do is different to what we do in terms of you're trying to help regen schemes. Is this correct? Help regen schemes come across or help developments move forward. So it is at that sort of more consultation sort of side of things. So I guess I'd be interested, like, how do you sum up what you're doing for clients, and who are your sort of perfect clients?
So if I was going to sum it up, I'd call it, I'm a fixer, and Bellona is a
Yeah,
fixer. It tends to be around either how schemes are funded or how schemes are promoted and the basis of
yeah,
those schemes. So we start at the very beginning with clients, which is, what do you want to do with this site? Does it work or not? So it's strategy in effect. So therefore, that's where I get involved. And my client base, mostly master developers, house builders, energy companies. And that relates to decarbonisation schemes, things like carbon capture, district heating, and so
yeah,
on. So there isn't such thing as an ideal client, but the projects that I love getting involved in have a regeneration element and tend to be in the North and the Midlands, in all honesty.
yeah.
I've worked on a couple of schemes in the South, but, the North's my home.
It's where the
Um,
heart is.
yeah, it's where the heart is, exactly. And I love both the West and the East Midlands as well. So
Yeah,
that covers that. You're quite right, though. The difference between a company like Bellona and a company, and your business is that you ultimately come in when the idea for the scheme has come forward. When, in fact, right, we've done our groundwork now. This is what we're going to go and present to the public.
yeah,
And I don't get involved in that with that side. Not often, anyway. It
yeah,
tends to be companies like yours that come in and say, right, this is the way that we're going to then subsequently go and promote what it is that you're trying to achieve through the scheme. And
yeah. Through this,
these are the right methods. These are the right
yeah,
people you need to keep on side. And these are the things. And ultimately, as well, it's also the channel back to the client to say, look, following on from this, this has worked, this hasn't. So therefore, this is the way that you subsequently need to change
yeah,
how you communicate with people. Because one of the big things that has definitely come out, particularly post-COVID, is there is a growing need for high quality engagement with local communities, because I
yeah,
think that lack of that process maybe 20, 30 years ago has subsequently led to the position we're in today, which is we don't build enough, and there is a lack of trust from the public in what is actually being or planned to be built. So
yeah,
that's why agencies like yours are very, very important.
yeah. And I think you obviously stay very close politically to what's going on. I think, is it fair to say you're quite happy with more sort of government situation at the moment than where it was? So here's a question: Labour's 1.5 million homes by 2030.
Yeah.
Is it doable?
No. In my opinion, I don't know. Because it was, in order to get to 1.5 million homes, so 300,000 homes a year within the 5 years. I mean, bear in mind, you were from a standing start. To get to 1.5 million, you need to have already done something like 300,000 a year. They've been in a year, and I think we're something like 200,000. Yeah. So I think that you've got so we're only building about 200,000. A lot of people have said, well, it's the planning
Yeah,
system that's the main blocker. I'm not one of those people, actually. I mean, yes, the planning system has its issues, but there are other big structural issues to think about with house building. In particular, how you support SME house builders to come forward, the massive ramp up in construction costs, the lack of good quality construction skills, or the availability of workers, which has been a massive issue. So I wouldn't hold a gun purely at the planning system as to why we don't do 300,000 homes a year. I remember Chris Young KC mentioned, he said, look, for us to get to 300,000 homes a year, you need to plan for more than that. And I actually think that I completely agree with that statement. I think what the government is introducing on planning reforms is actually very, very sensible. They're
yeah,
still advocating a plan-led system. They're reintroducing strategic planning, which a good friend of mine, Katrina Riddell's been working on pretty heavily with a number of other industry colleagues, and you'll see a paper out on that actually this week on strategic planning, which in effect reintroduces
Yeah.
the need for places to work together to solve. It's not just big local plans, but to solve big sub-regional issues to support new developments to come forward. So I think that the government has grasped the planning nettle pretty well, but it always takes a long time for these changes to rinse through into practice. And therefore, I think Owen and I always used to have a phrase that we said, "Look, any change that's made by government, it takes 2 years to get down into,
Yeah.
local authorities." So
Filter down. Yeah.
you'll always have a bit of a lag. I think if they carry on where they are at the moment, and if providing there aren't too many other global shocks economically, I can see them getting to 1.5 million homes in the next Parliament. So over the
Yeah.
lifetime of the next Parliament, but I don't see them being able to get to 1.5 million by 2029.
No. And it's your work. How much is like housing and how much is more sort of infrastructure?
It depends on the needs of the client, really. So, I mean, we
Yeah.
had a couple of house builders that, one last year we secured a grant to bring forward a big
Yeah.
scheme in South Yorkshire. There was another which I've done various bits of work for, including, plans for a modular housing factory and others. But then you've got others that say, well, do you know what? The big thing that will accelerate the delivery of this scheme is either a new link road or a new railway station. Ian, can you work on it to try and bring it forward? And we would work on
Yeah.
that.
And
But
they're changing that as well, aren't they? Are they trying to improve the planning around nationally significant infrastructure
yeah,
projects?
yeah, that's right. So, I mean, there's a whole host of changes in relation to NSIPs, development consent orders, so things that in
Yeah.
effect government take responsibility for rather than planning being determined at local level. So yeah, that you're quite right. That does form part of the planning reforms that are being introduced by the government. And I think part of the desire of government as well, to go back to the early part of your question, is around, well, can we increase density of houses around railway stations? So can we
Yeah.
accelerate bringing that forward? And that I completely agree with as a policy aim, because my view is if you end up building round railway stations, ideally close to town centres, number one, you are encouraging people to use rail, so get off the road, which has a decarbonisation effect. But then secondly, if you've got people living close to railway stations and close to town centres, then you're encouraging footfall within those town centres and city centres. And that's something that over the last 30 years has dwindled. It's led to a hollowing out of town and city centres, which people have noticed and have got disenfranchised about. And so I think one of the key things we can do is try and get people back there and frankly, get people spending. And one of the ways you can do
Yeah.
that is to get people living close to transport hubs. So yeah, that is
Yeah.
absolutely the right policy
Get
focus.
movement going. Yeah. Interesting. So talking about transport, you and I are both heading up to UK REEIF next week. Although by the time I've probably edited this and got it out, it'll be about a month ago. What's the game plan? So I've got a few dates. I've got a few dates and meetings booked in. You've been quite a few times, haven't you?
Yeah, I've been since day one. This is year 4 of me at UK REEIF. It's
Yeah.
turned into a bit of a beast.
Yeah.
And well done,
Well, it seems to be.
well done to the team that have organised it, because I think you had
Yeah.
built environment network for the first 3 years, and then there was management buyout last year. So you've got the new team in effect have got
Okay.
responsibility for it, and it's growing and growing and growing. I think last year was something like at least 10,000 people attending over the 3 days. They're expecting more this year. And it's been
Oh,
really,
wow.
really good. I think what they've tapped into is there was a clear need post-COVID. People went, do you know what? We're not going to go to MIPIM anymore in Cannes. We need something a bit
Yeah.
more local. And if you remember, in the last decade, you had MIPIM UK, Earl's Court, and a couple of other events that were trying to meet.
Yeah. 10 years ago, you had Future Build and Eco Build and things like that, and they just.
They fell by the wayside. Yeah, exactly. And the guys have picked up the baton and run with
Yeah.
REEIF really, really well. So I sorted my diary a while ago. But I mean, it's the same plan that I applied to MIPIM, which is 60% of my time is things that I've already lined up. So whether I'm chairing a panel, being on a panel, having one-to-one
Yeah.
meetings, seeing clients, So I tend to apply that route. So 60% of my time committed, leaving 40% to go around the bunker, go and chat to people at various industry events, because you need a little bit of time, and then a little bit of time as well to get away from it during the day. Because there will be, my advice to you will be, number one, wear trainers throughout, and then number two is to take yourself off mid-afternoon, go somewhere else, go for a coffee, go and think about something else, and then go back into it. Because if you think about really staying the
15 hours a day,
of the 3 days, it'll kill you. So just take your time with it. But no, it's a great event, and lots of interesting people.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll catch up there. Right. So finally, you mentioned it earlier, and I haven't really got to grips with this before, but you've got a new activity, haven't you?
Yeah.
Aren't you going to be commentating somewhere?
Yes. So it is a sideline. I made my commentary debut actually on the 19th of April at Silverstone. So I sponsor through Bellona a good friend of mine, Jim Bryan, in Porsches, and through Jim, I've got to know. I've got back into my first love, which is motorsport. Having been dormant for years and years and years. And last year I went, do you know what? I just said to him randomly, I said, I've always wanted to be a commentator. Do you know the guys that do the commentary at Porsche? And he put me in touch with a guy called Paul Jerd, who he acts as like the main media coordinator for the Porsche Club Championship. And through Paul, I've got in touch with MSVR that put on all the or a lot of the club racing across the UK. And I pestered them, Alex. I just said, look, I've got no experience, but I've got all this media experience, and I'm a massive car nerd. So would you fancy giving me an opportunity? And unbelievably, at the start of this year, Scott Pucknell came back to me and said, yeah, I mean, I'm prepared to give you a go for a couple of sessions. How's Silverstone in April sound? And I said to my wife, because they offered me two, they said, oh, it's Silverstone and the Snetterton in August. And I said to her, I think April might be a bit early, I'm not sure I could do it. And she basically told me to man up and just say, you've always wanted to do this, just go and do it. And I didn't know, by the time I got to Silverstone on the Saturday, I'd never been it. I'd only stepped inside the commentary box once. I didn't know how any of the technology worked. But somehow we got through it pretty well. And I absolutely loved it. Absolutely loved it for a full 2 days. So that means that my next commentary will be Snetterton in August. But the plan there, Alex, is it's just a sideline, which is I thoroughly enjoy doing it. I get to watch motorsport, which I pay to go and watch any of these things. So the fact that I'm being paid to commentate on something I probably commentate to myself about anyway is unbelievable. But then it's also nice where I've not done media work for a couple of years actually, because I've been I'm more behind the scenes now with Bellona. But it's been nice to get back into that, and the thrill of having to now you're on air. You've got to make this work. You've got to do it well in one take. And then if you make a mistake, you've got to quickly cover your tracks or, elect on the right way to proceed, which sometimes is not coming and saying it ever again. But no, it's been
doesn't it?
What's that?
I said it keeps the skill set strong.
Oh, completely. Yeah, absolutely right. Yeah.
Horrendous at that.
Is it not something you ever wanted to do?
No, I think I'd run out of things to say. You're very good at keep going. I think I'd either find myself just watching it. I don't know. It's interesting. I'll have to find. We'll have to. Have you got your clips? Have you got clips of it? You'll have to share it with me.
Yeah, I've got a couple of clips anyway, which were filmed on the day. Sadly, there wasn't a live stream.
Right, Ian, aka Tomo, as everyone I know calls you. Thank you so much for that.
Pleasure.
That was brilliant. Yeah, I'll let you continue your journey up north.
Lovely.
I'll speak to you later.
All right, mate. Take care of yourselves. Thank you for having me on.